Hey, well, that was the sound of the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 with the Hitchcock's Enfield Precision shorty silencers. Baffles in. Now, I will do a short comparison with the baffles in and the baffles out a little bit later in this video. But I've reached a sort of a crossroads with the Interceptor, and I wanted to discuss that first. She's just over 4 years old now. When I first got the Interceptor back in 2019, I made one or two modifications during that year. Then, of course, the pandemic hit us, and then I got the Classic 500, then the Continental GT, which I then chopped in and swapped for a Classic 350 Reborn. So the Interceptor hasn't got huge mileage on it. She's virtually new to all intents and purposes. She's been off the road for over a year, and obviously because I've been running those other bikes, you just don't get a chance to ride all of the bikes as much as you'd like to. So in real terms, I'd not ridden the Interceptor much for 2 years. I'd sort of altered and set up the Interceptor for a sporty ride. But over the last 2 or 3 years, my style of riding, my preference for riding has changed. Now, that's not just me getting older. During the pandemic, the government the local council sort of seemed to run around putting new speed limits up everywhere. And on most of the major country roads near where I live, the speed limit is often only 40 miles an hour. Previously, there were unrestricted 60 mile an hour roads. Now, we know that this is a programme which is going to continue. I think it's this month. Changes come into force in Wales, where the default is 20 miles an hour, with default motorway speeds at 50 miles an hour. We've got something similar coming up in Scotland, and although the English government or highways department are doing it slightly differently, they're doing it here in England as well. And I know from speaking to commenters, viewers on this channel over the last couple of years, it's happening abroad, it's happening on the continent. Now, this has created a situation here in the UK where, for the most part, we're just sort of bimbling around at 40 to 50 miles an hour. Okay, you can go faster on some roads, but that is the general sort of traffic movement on our roads these days. And the crazy thing is, this is on the main routes, the good roads. These nasty, badly maintained, bumpy, narrow, windy farm tracks that you see me riding on now are still unrestricted. They're still 60 mile an hour zones. So this whole sort of programme of change is clearly not about road safety. Anyway, I'm digressing. The last week or so that I've had the Interceptor back on the road, the way I had it set up, I started to feel as though this bike's become a bit irrelevant. I'd fitted the YSS adjustable front suspension on this bike and the YSS piggyback track shocks at the rear end. And I'd set them up, or tuned them as far as my expertise allowed, for a sporty sort of taut, responsive handling characteristic. And it all worked really well. I was really pleased with it. The problem is, comfort does suffer a bit below 40 miles an hour. The front end's not so bad, but those rear shocks do occasionally give you quite a kick in the pants at low speeds, sort of 30 to 40 miles an hour while you're moving around in urban areas. And I've noticed that, quite often, if you're riding around in urban areas, you get to the point where you're sort of suffering pain in your backside quite quickly, and you feel as though you need to get off. And then when you get back out in the open again, the characteristics of the shocks over 40 miles an hour start to sort of dial in more comfort, and that feeling of pain goes away. And I came to the conclusion that what I needed was something of a compromise. I didn't need that razor-sharp high-speed handling anymore, so I could sacrifice some of that to get more sort of low-speed comfort. Now, the first thing that I did was release some of the preload on the front suspension, and the results have been amazing. Now, as I had it set up, actually the front end was very comfortable, but just slackening the preload off a little bit has brought the front end down slightly, noticeably, and without losing any feedback from the steering, it's really smoothed the road out for me. I tell you what it reminds me of. Those lovely upside down shocks that Royal Enfield have fitted to the Super Meteor. As for the back end, if you remember when I had the Continental GT, I put the sort of traditional track shocks from YSS on the bike. Now, these are a little less performance focused, a more conventional shock absorber. And I had remembered that when I first fitted those, it really did improve the comfort of the Continental GT. And as luck would have it, when I sold the Continental GT, I put the factory shocks back on and retained those shocks. So I dug them out of the box in my garage, and after 20 minutes of fumbling about, had them fitted to the Interceptor 650. I've set them up on minimum preload, and I have softened the damping a little bit. So they are very responsive, but what is most important, at low speeds, the dampening being soft, there's a lot more comfort there. And they don't act too shabbily when you get over 40 miles an hour. You know, those basic sort of built-in characteristics are still there, they haven't gone. I've still got a little bit more fiddling to do with them, but so far I'm very pleased with both the results and the way they look. Now, I know on this footage that you're watching, it looks like the bike is really sort of jumping up and down a lot, and there are a lot of shocks. The thing is, this is a really bad piece of road. It seems to me that the council have done no repairs on these roads now for about a decade. There's a lot of subsidence where the road surface literally just falls away with about 6 inches difference within the space of a foot. Probably because the main traffic that goes over them are sort of goods vehicles and agricultural vehicles, so that, you know, they do take a lot of wear and tear. But the Interceptor does feel a lot more, you know, of a comfortable all-rounder now. She's feeling a bit more relaxed. We're getting there. So, what about those Enfield Precision shorties? What you're really here for is to listen to the sound test. Right, this is a stretch of road not too far away from me. A nice little sort of S-bend where you get to sort of exercise the engine and get the best exhaust note from it. What I normally do is I come into the entrance of this particular bend at about 45 miles an hour in top gear. I drop down to 4th as I get into the bend proper and then accelerate out of it. Same speed, same gear. First of all with the baffles in, and then on the second run with the baffles taken out. I've got to say, although I could detect a slight difference myself there in person, the camera hasn't really picked up a huge amount of difference between the two, but I think we discovered that with the other Enfield Precision pipes. The difference between the two is subtle. And then here we go on the return run. And then the same run with the baffles taken out. I'm afraid I only recorded this one way. My apologies for that. Right, before anybody jumps into the comments section complaining that I have the baffles in the bike here, this is a bit of B-roll that I shot before I actually did the test runs. For the most part, I shoot the B-roll before I actually film the main part of the video. Pulling up in front of the camera there was actually one of the first takes that I made on this video. Now, the first time that I listened to these sound tests, I couldn't really tell much difference, but I think on reviewing this as I've been editing, the baffled out does sound a little bit louder and a little bit raunchier. There's not a great deal in it, even in person it is a subtle difference. If anything, the baffles out just sounds a little bit dirtier and a little bit less harmonious than with the baffles in. The sound, if I'm honest, both ways is pretty much the same as the full-length Enfield Precision pipes that preceded these pipes. It's a very pleasant exhaust note, and I do remember I fitted these just before the bike took its MOT, and I was watching the guy rev the engine through the open doors in the workshop, and he had a big smile on his face while he was doing it. Now, I'd just like to answer one query that a viewer had last week. He'd bought these pipes and fitted them, and he was a bit concerned that when he packed up after riding the bike for the first time that the pipes were smoking quite profusely. Mine did exactly the same. I didn't ride the bike after I fitted them until I took the bike to the MOT testing station. Now, that's about a 15-minute ride, and while I was sat outside waiting for the tester to come out and get the bike, I did notice that both pipes were smoking. I think all it is there's some sort of preservative coating or oil on the internals of these silencers. Obviously, they could potentially be in stock in a damp warehouse or something like that for quite a long time. This soon boils off and dissipates, so that is perfectly normal. It'll only do it after your first run. If it's a short run, it won't do it again after that. Right, so that concludes today's video. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to let the footage play out with full sound. Now, the sound is from an action camera. Actually, for once in this location, the wind conditions were quite favourable. But I'll let the video conclude, with a couple of minutes motoring just to let you get the feel for how these exhausts sound. Now, the camera and microphone are strapped to my chest, which actually gives you a more realistic idea of what the exhaust sounds like to the rider. Don't forget, the exhaust system is behind you and it's firing the sound away from you as you move along. It's okay strapping a microphone near to the muzzle of your exhaust, but that's not representative of what you're actually going to hear when you're riding the bike. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. It does sort of titivate the algorithm and help the channel along. Other ways of helping the channel, you can sign on to my Patreon page, or you can, if you like, thank me through the super thanks button below this video. Either would be much appreciated. I am, of course, going to be back next week, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.